their own little thing that they want from their new home or their new investment. And we have a series of questions that we can go through that'll help guide them through that. So our mission is to communicate well, to negotiate and find the best win-win situation for our buyer, and to win that client for life and a wonderful referral partner and possibly a great friend. So the first thing we're going to do when we meet with a buyer, whether they come in because of a online lead, open house, door knocking, referral, we're going to find out what they need before we even dive into the buyer's representation. And a lot of times what we're going to do is we're going to share with them the information about brokerage services. And this is a form that we have to give every buyer. It's the state of Texas. Anybody who's considering looking. It's actually an attachment in our email. It's on our Facebook. It's on our website. You can find it everywhere. And what I love about this form is that the state of Texas really does a good job on this information of brokerage services, also known as an IABS. Let me just pull it up here because I've already pulled it up. And it talks about like, what are our duties at the bare minimum, right? We put our buyers needs above our own. Okay. We're going to inform them of material information. Now, are we going to visit with the buyer about things that are outside of our expertise? Like, we don't give tax advice. We don't give accounting advice. We can't do a lot of things that are outside of our scope. But our goal is to share with them what we can find out and make sure that it's material facts. Okay. We're going to answer questions. One of the great things that we have is that we can connect our buyers with our community. You guys know, we have thousands of agents that we have access to. And sometimes they need vendors. We can give them access to our vendors, and you can get to that at juanandbettina.com/vendors. Okay. And of course, this is something that we're finding in this market. Sometimes we'll get a client that might not want to be honest or fair, right? And this already outlines how we need to be honest and fair, right? It is outside of our scope and our minimum requirements by law. So if a buyer wants us to be dishonest, legally, we're not allowed to be dishonest in our negotiations. Make sense? If you haven't gotten to that place yet, it'll come. This says, as an agent, if we're hired by the owner, we work for the owner. If the buyer hires us, we work for the buyer. So this is a good opportunity for us to share with our buyers that says, hey, if for some reason there's a house out there that you want and you go to that listing agent by law is required to represent the seller wholeheartedly and not you. They'll be fair and honest, but they're looking out for the best interest of that seller. And then I love explaining what an intermediary is. An intermediary is where two agents are working for the same brokerage. So at eXp, we have thousands and thousands of eXp agents here in Texas, all working under the same brokerage and the same managing broker, Karen Richards. So if that should come to be the case, there's an extra form that we'll provide to the client, both the buyers and the sellers, that says, hey, both agents are representing, both agents are working with eXp. We cannot disclose if the seller will take less or if the buyer will pay more. Okay, so just know that there's that good faith thing. Sub-agent, we don't really do this in North Texas as much, so that doesn't apply to us here in North Texas. Okay, and it also says all agreements between you and the broker should be in writing and clearly established. I love this because this sets precedent and gets us to the buyer's 101. I'm sorry, buyer's rep agreement. So the information of brokerage services fully outlines.
Chicken is
Oh,
going.
I'm going to mute you, Lavinia. It fully outlines the relationship with the buyer and the agent, the seller and the agent, should they represent both, and it lets the client know that that agreement needs to be in writing. So we have them sign this, and basically this just acknowledges that the client has seen this. There's nothing to agree to. It's just that we have given this to them, and we'll add this to our sky slope. All right. So that's our information of broker services. Now, go buyer's rep agreement. So the buyer's rep agreement is the agreement that allows the client to hire us so that we can represent them. Also, it makes sure that what they tell us is held confidential, right? In this agreement, it says that we're going to be loyal and obedient as long as it's legal. Our job is to obey. That's always been my toughest one, but we will obey. Disclosure of material facts, accountability, reasonable skills, and care, right? So these are the things that we're going to for sure do. So this is an example of a buyer's rep agreement. So let's kind of go over it really quick. It's going to have our client's name, our information, and it defines acquire, which means to purchase or lease, closing. And when we talk about closing, there's a difference between closing and funding. Closing is when you go to sign the paperwork. Funding is when the bank has released the money and it has funded, and the title company has the funds to release to pay off the lender and the title and the seller. Okay. The market area, I generally just do North Texas because that's an area that I serve. If for some reason our clients are looking in other areas, of course, we have access to tens of thousands of agents. In fact, almost 90,000 agents. So we can pretty much help a client anywhere. And then the property is going to be the real estate that they're looking, and it can be new construction, land for sale by owners, anything like that. And we're going to make sure that we dive deep into all the places that you can find land and how we as an agent can help. The term, depending on the market and depending on our buyer's needs, that can be a term of 6 months to 12 months. Okay. Broker's obligation. My obligation is to help, as an agent, is to help the client acquire a property or purchase a property in our market area. What we ask in return is that our client and our buyer works exclusively with us. One of the great reasons you want to work exclusively with one agent is that in that process, what we have found is that that agent really gets to know the buyers. There's a whole series of questions, a whole series of going and looking at houses and learning what a buyer really wants. Before I've had a buyer go in and they're like, oh my gosh, I have to have a house with a pool. The only reason I want to move is because this house, I need it to have a pool and I need to have a downstairs bedroom, right? And they go and they look at a property and they found this amazing house, but it doesn't have a pool. And we can say, hey, you mentioned at the beginning that you really need a pool. Did something's change, right? And then they're like, oh, no, I really do need this pool. I really wish this house had a pool. And then we can talk about, okay, could we put in a pool? Is it financially feasible to put in a pool? Is it worth it? And it saves a buyer that time of spinning when we have all that unemotional data that we can bring back. And that happens a lot. And also, you don't want, as a buyer, to go directly to the seller's listing agent and expect that seller's listing agent to look out for you, because that seller has signed a listing agreement with that agent, and that agent has agreed to work to that agent has agreed to be obligated to that seller, not the buyer. So representations, this basically means that you are who you are, you are who you are, and you can sign on your own behalf. Intermediary, we talked about this in the information of brokerage services. That means that that both parties, seller and buyer, are being represented by the same brokerage. Okay. In this case, we'll work it out and you'll get another form notifying you. Just know that if I'm representing you as a buyer and I also note that the seller is taking less or has some situations that they don't want disclosed, I cannot disclose to the buyer. We have to treat it like it's separate. You have the option of not looking at listings that are being sold by EXP, but we never recommend that. Competing clients, that basically just means that I have other clients. We have other buyers as well that we work with. Okay, that makes sense. Confidential information. Remember, the seller has this, you have this. If I know that you will pay more and you don't want me to let the seller know that you will pay more, I'm not going to go tell the seller that you're willing to pay more. Okay. Broker's fee. We, as Homestar sellers, we ask all of our buyers to pay 3%. We'll make every effort to get that from the MLS. So if you're on Netris, and we'll go through our MLS, it actually shows on there the buyer's agent's commission. If for some reason they don't pay 3%, we will for sure let you know. And builders are right now are offering bonuses. Well, they actually can pay more than that as well. So 3% is what we have historically have received for on a close, and we get that from the cooperating brokerage. So just know that in 5, 6, 10 years down the road, when after we've helped you as a buyer purchase the home, and 5, 6, 10 years down the road, you decide to sell and you come back to us, we're going to do a listing agreement. And in that listing agreement, it's going to say, hey, Mr. Seller, you agreed to pay our brokerage a set amount, let's say 6%. 3% will pay the listing agent, and 3% of that will go towards the buyer's agent. So right now, you might not be paying for me, but just know in 6, 5, 10 years, you're going to pay 6% towards the listing, half of which we'll give to the buyer's agent as the cooperating agent for bringing the buyer. And source of commission, we just heard, we only earned and payable. We only get paid once you purchase the property, you close and you fund. Okay. If we go through all this work, we've shown you 100 houses, something happens, heaven forbid, you lose your job, you can no longer purchase the house. You don't owe us any money. Okay. We just ask that down the road, you come back to us and let us help you. Or meanwhile, if your friend or coworker or family member is looking to buy or sell sometime, that you refer them to us. 3-way text introduction is the best way. Additional compensation. Sometimes we do get additional compensations. We'll notify you. There's a separate form. As you can tell, the state of Texas has provided all these promulgated forms for us to use to fill out, to disclose to you for everything. Okay. This talks about the list, like acquiring our brokers' listings, construction, service providers, and things like that. Protection period. So the protection period is like that period of time. Let's say we agree to work together for 6 months, but during the 6 months, we submitted an offer. Okay. And then after our agreement ends, the seller accepts our offer. It means that we still get to work together and we'll still get paid for it. And the listing agent will still pay us, and we'll still agree to represent you for at least 30 days after this protection period, only on the properties that we have already showed you and we've already started the process rolling. If for something happens after the 6 or 12 months, whatever we've agreed on in this buyer's rep agreement, you choose to, you go find another property and we didn't actually start that process with you, then you're on your own. Okay. Escrow authorization. Here in North Texas, we don't actually escrow, but the title company will hold your escrows. And we'll dive deeper into that later on and what escrows mean. We get paid in Dallas County. mediation. If something happens, we'll mediate, and then we get your typical contract language that we're going to see in all the other stuff. Okay. An addenda to this that's always checked, and I don't have the option to uncheck, is information about brokerage services, because state of Texas requires us to make sure that we have given that to you. So we'll make sure that our buyers acknowledge and check that off, that it's been given. Then we have all the special provisions, and it's outlined there. And then we just get everybody's signature. What this form does, it allows us as agents to be hired and work for the buyer. So we're really super excited about that. If you have any questions about this, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to move on. Yay. Okay. So services to our buyers, these are all the services. They're all outlined in the buyer's rep agreement, but also a lot of this is stuff that we do above and beyond. Okay. And we're going to go over the bulk of this in this buyer's presentation right now. It's a lot, but it's going to be easy. All right. We talked about how we get compensated already. That's already designed in the buyer's rep agreement. So now let's go into lenders. So I don't know if you know, but the main reason out of your option period, we're going to talk about option period in a little bit, but the first thing we need to do, and we're going to help our buyers do, is connect them with a lender that is best for them. Not all lenders are the same. Not all lenders have the same programs. Like right now, we're working with the buyer who's working with a hard money lender because he can't work with a traditional lender. And with the rates they are, it just makes sense for him. But some questions that if you're going to go out on your own and you're going to shop for a lender, ask about how long they've been in business. What is their company known for? What programs are they known for? How long they've been in business? I don't know if you know this, but it's pretty easy to get your loan officer's license. Many loan officers are great at taking an application, but when push comes to shove, when things get complicated, right? And there's a little nitty gritty knowledge and having to fight to get a loan closed. Does that loan officer know how to make that happen? What percentage of contracts make it to closing? What's their ratio on that? Do loans fall out during the third-party financing condition period, right? Sometimes there's a lot of lenders who only will take the application, throw out a pre-qualification versus pre-approval. We'll dive deeper into that. And it really costs the agents money. So we really recommend you get pre-approved. Some banks will say they only do pre-qualifications. A pre-qual, it doesn't carry as much weight. Most sellers are not going to want to accept an offer on a pre-qualification. So when that has become the case, I will push to have that bank, if they are the only place that has that program that buyer needs, that buyer and the agent both need to push that buyer goes through the entire underwriting process. And the reason we want to do this is because if you get under contract, you're writing earnest money check, option money check, inspections, appraisals, surveys, credit. You can lose 5 figures before you even get to the closing tables. And let's say it's just a lot of money to put at risk because the lender doesn't want to do all that work up front. So let's dive deeper into that. First, you're going to fill out a loan application, kind of get a pre-qual. You're going to talk with their lender. They're going to say, okay, this kind of makes sense. And you're going to then submit your W-2s for the last 2 years. If you're self-employed, it's going to be a little bit different. You're going to do bank statements. And then they're going to submit it to what they call the processor and the underwriter, who's going to actually go through that whole file and find any red flags. Did you know that there's fraud out there and spam out there and people are putting things on people's credit and they don't even know about it? It gives you time to clean that up. You don't want to go under contract and then and then try to hastily figure it out. Do you have your divorce papers? All those things. All that's going to be done ahead of time. Is it a pain in the katush? Yes. Is it worth it? Abso-freaking-lutely. Okay. Now, here's some lenders that we've worked for in the past. Luis Rios with Success Lending. We've been working with him for, golly, almost 20 years. Okay. Brett Carmen, we've known. He's with Town Square. I'm sorry, with First Community Mortgage. Alan Lester is with Town Square. Luis Rios with Success Lending. If you talk to them, you'll know that they all have different personalities, different programs, and different niches. Okay? There's things that Success Lending and Luis can do that the others cannot do. You can also find out how much experience they have. They have different niches. Luis can figure out ridiculous, if you think you might have like any obstacles, Luis usually can figure out a way to work it out. Okay, so go ahead, visit with us. Let's learn what your situation is, and we can actually match you probably with the best lender for you. So next, after you've been pre-approved, we're going to ask you a series of questions, okay, to get a better understanding and better clarity of what you're looking for in your next home. And you can also window shop on our website at homestarsellers.com, or just pretty much anywhere you find a home, we can definitely help you with that. So the contract. Once you find your home, we've gone through, we've viewed, we've narrowed them down. We're like, yes, we've looked at the seller's disclosure. We've looked at the neighborhood. This is the house we want. We're in love. We want it. Okay. Let's go over what the contract looks like. So ahead of time during this Buyer's 101 process, so that you have an idea, and the buyer has an idea of the contract prior to submitting an offer. Because for most of our buyers, that this purchase process is one of the biggest, hugest financial decisions of their entire life. So let's go over what a contract looks like, sample contract. So here's a sample contract. And of course, you can find all this at juanandbettina.com/buyers. So we're going to go over the seller's name and confirm how they want it to appear on the contract. Take this time to write that down and make a note of that. All right. This is the property description. I also love to go over improvements before looking at houses. So if we go over the contract with a buyer before they even look at the house, they'll understand that that light fixture comes with the property, anything that's permanently attached. So I like to think of it, if you take this house, you turn it around, you shake it, and you dump it out the front door, everything else that stays remains with the property. Okay. One of the biggest discussions for a long time is TVs. So what you'll see is it's mounts and brackets for televisions, but not the television. I still like to put it in exclusions if it's not coming with the property, so there's no confusion, just because that seems to be a big deal. The other thing I like to talk about is shrubbery and landscaping. If we're looking at a property and there's some kind of landscaping, like a landscaping rock or accessory, or maybe a decorative swing set or a bird bath, I like to have that conversation with the listing agent ahead of time. Okay. Accessories, all the accessories that come with the property. I also like to have that conversation with the listing agent, but also I like to have that conversation now, so that we know when we look at the property. Exclusions are usually listed on the MLS, but we all know, us listing agents, sometimes we get busy, we don't know, we haven't gone through this whole process. Have that conversation with the listing agent if this is the house we want to put an offer on, so that we're not having to come back later before closing or during the walkthrough and be like, hey, where's that bird bath that was in the front yard? Or where's that chandelier? The other thing that we need to do is make sure that we print out, if this is the offer we're putting down, make sure we print out the entire MLS sheet and all the photos ahead of time, so that if for some reason during the walkthrough something has changed, we know from This is the date we looked at the property. This is the way it looked. This is what we're expecting when we purchase the property, okay? The inspection report is really helpful with that too. So sales price, third party. So this is the cash. So our lender, when during that consultation on the pre-approval, it's going to say, hey, they qualify for a 5% loan, 10%, 3.5%, 0%. That's the cash portion we're going to put down here. And then we're going to put the financing portion here. So let's say for easy math, $500,000 offer, 10% down. So we're going to put in 5,000 cash. Wait, 50,000 cash. I was like, I knew that was wrong, bad math. I was like, 5,000, 50,000 cash, 450 financing. The total of that is going to be 500,000. Okay. Understand that that 50,000 is cash for the offer for the sales price of your home. There are other fees that can be included on that as well. All right. And we're going to go into that here in a second. If this property is for lease, we're going to need to check off that there is a residential lease that accompanies this. And we're going to add this as an addenda. Earnest money and option money. Remember how I said earlier that there's a lot of money that buyers submit before they even get to the closing table? Here's an example. Earnest money, it's typically about 1%. Okay. The sellers would like to see more. Buyers typically would like to see less. What we're typically seeing is 1%. If we're competing, we can go as high as 2% or even higher, as high as the buyer's willing to go. Option money, option fee. The option fee is actually the money that the buyer gives to the seller. It's non-refundable, but can get applied towards the cash portion of their purchase. So let's say $250 to $500 option fee. And what you're doing is you're purchasing the option to get out of the contract for any reason for this period of time in paragraph 5B. So in here it says 7 days. So we're seeing 5 days, 7 days. Sellers usually want less days because they don't want they want to know that they're under contract. Buyers need to have enough time in there for them to do their due diligence, meaning they get their inspections out there. They drive around the neighborhood at night, make sure it's the neighborhood they want. They get their everybody's approval. They bring the whole family. During this period of time, this is a period of time you're going to do your entire due diligence. Okay. You get the inspector in there and the inspector says, oh, I recommend you have the roof looked at, the AC looked at, the foundation looked at. You're going to get all your people in there to look at it. The inspection is another check you're going to cut. Let's say roughly $500, depending on the size of the property, right? A lot of times roof might charge an inspection fee, typically not. HVAC typically will charge an additional inspection fee. Foundation companies sometimes will charge an inspection fee. Engineers report for sure will charge inspection fees. So there's a lot of extra monies that can come out of pocket. So just be prepared ahead of time. I don't want anybody to get in here and be so tight that they can't afford to do their due diligence during the due diligence period. Okay. The earnest money and the option money is typically sent to the title company. You'll notice that there's a lot of blanks in here. All of this is negotiable. Right now we're using Capital Title, Terry Ralph, for our, and that auto populates in our system. She sponsors a lot of our events and we've had a relationship with her. She's been doing this for golly, 20 years. She knows the ins and outs of title. So she's part of our team, and like so many others, there's tons of amazing title companies out there. So she's not the only one, but we like working with her. There is a time frame on this. So be prepared that once you're under contract, you have 3 days after the effective date of the contract. And we're going to talk about the effective date. Another name for effective date can be executed date, the date that this is executed. Don't screw this up. Send that money in. All right. Title policy and survey. If you have a loan, you're required to have a title policy That's insurance that the title is correct and that there's no heirs or anybody else that says this property belongs to me. Okay, that's what that insurance is for. The title company is going to go through, do an entire title search, make sure there's no liens, that the property is conveyed to the buyer free and clear. It can be seller's expense, buyer's expense. We have seen it checked both. Essentially, that means they're splitting the cost. Okay, and then there's also survey coverage. Essentially, that's what this is survey coverage. Shortages in the area. So let's say the property's, you know, listed at 1 acre. We think we're buying 1 acre, but the survey's off and it's actually less. Who's going to purchase that? You can not, it's not mandatory that you check this off. If you're buying a cash property, it's not mandatory that you have title policy or survey coverage or a survey at that, but we always recommend it, of course. All right. We're going to ask, here's survey. So this is something that gets confused. So typically in our contracts, we say that the survey is going to be provided by the seller within blank days. Typically it's 3 days. If it's on the MLS, so if we're a listing agent, it's on the MLS, that's really technically not considered delivery. We actually, delivery is in the inbox in the email to the cooperating agent. So if we get it in our inbox and we share it with the buyer, and it's got to be the affidavit and the survey. There's an affidavit that the seller has to go get notarized. And it doesn't have to be both sellers if it's a Mr. and Mrs. Just one seller has to get it notarized. And that affidavit accompanies this survey. And it basically says, yes, there has been changes. There's not aware of any changes. If the pool's been put in, fences have been moved, maybe like a lot of cement work has been done. Those are changes on a survey that the lender or the title company may require a buyer to get a new survey. If for any reason, let's say the affidavit wasn't accompanied, who is going to pay for the new survey? We check that box here, seller or buyer. More often than not, we see that, and it depends on the market. If you're competing and the buyer might say, hey, I'll pay for it. The other option here is that the buyer will pay for a new one or the seller will pay for a new one. Okay, so you have multiple objections. Let's say you're buying a property and you want to put in a daycare. He says, hey, I need to be able to put a small business here. I need to be able to put trucks here. We have seen this say residential use. That's redundant because this is obviously a residential contract. You don't have to put residential use in here. And it says, after so many days after receiving the commitment exception documents and the survey, the buyer has that period of time to ensure that we can put dump trucks there. We can run a daycare out of there. We can put a pool in the backyard, something like that. Okay, that's usually what we see there. I'm just going to go over the blanks. Membership in Property Owners Association, that's another way of saying HOA or Homeowners Association. If it is or is not in a homeowners association. If it is a part of a homeowners association, TREC has an additional form promulgated that we fill out, and we'll get to that too. Okay. Tidewaters, you'll notice that there's verbiage in here for the entire state of Texas. North Texas does not have Tidewaters, so it doesn't apply. But all of this on how to deal with that, if it comes to be an issue, we can reference this contract. Now, this contract used to be 1 page, as you can tell. There's been things that have come up, and over the years, it has gotten longer and longer and longer. Okay, so let's talk about property condition. One of the big things and very important is that in here, it says that the sellers will have the utilities on so that the buyers can do inspections and have access to the property. This is outlined right here in paragraph A. Seller's expense shall immediately cause existing utilities to be turned on and shall keep the utilities on during the time this contract is in effect. Now, I don't know how, there has been times where we've had sellers that didn't do that. The buyers have the option to terminate because they can't get an inspection if they cannot get the sellers to do that. All right. We've seen buyers before turn on utilities, but that's super risky. So just be aware water and gas. Like if something happens, it's a liability for us buyers. I'm not an attorney and I'm not giving legal advice. So this is where we ask them to do that. Seller's disclosure, typically listing agents are going to put it on the MLS and we can give it to the buyers ahead of time. If for some reason we do not have access to the seller's disclosure ahead of time, we're going to say, hey, please give that to us like in the next 1 to 2 days prior to inspection, right? I like getting the seller's disclosure before we put down non-refundable option money of $500 if possible. It's not always possible. And at the end of the day, it's at the buyer's discretion on what they want to do. If we're competing, then there's that. Okay. Now, acceptance of property condition. Now, this is where buyers can get a little confused between as is and accept as. So you'll notice that it's as is, but it doesn't mean that a buyer cannot do an inspection and negotiate repairs during the option period. So as is, so we're going to check as is, but let's say a buyer walks into a room and they're like, I want this, but I need this offer of $500,000 is contingent on the on the seller staining the fence in the backyard. That's going to be the treatment, and we'll put that here. Buyer accept the property as is, provided seller at seller's expense shall complete the following specific repairs and treatments, and we'll put that here. It might be replace the carpet in the office. It might be repainting, painting the entire house a specific color. Okay, if it's in here, I would make it as specific as possible, or at least come back in the option period and be very specific. Okay, especially if it's painting the house. You don't want them to repaint the house red, and you don't want them to use their neighbor's 12-year-old daughter to paint the house. You see my Ava painting a house in there, that won't look good, right? So just be as specific as you can. In here also says if there's lender required repairs, the seller, you know, how that works out, as well as other things. Okay. Broker fees are in a separate agreement. We talked about that, buyer's rep agreement and listing agreement with the seller. Closing date. So all dates. So you notice at the very beginning, we said that earnest monies and option monies are due within, let's say, 3 days of executed date. And then we have our closing date. So that's going to be a different date. So closing is a day that we're going to close, where everybody is going to sign off. We have had where, let's say we close on Thursday, but it didn't fund till Friday, but everybody needs to close on Thursday. Possession. So there's 2 possessions. You can have possession where the buyer can walk in, get the key, and start moving in on closing. That's upon closing and funding. So remember, if you close on Thursday and doesn't fund till Friday, you do not get possession till Friday. Okay. I also like to let buyers know, please don't plan on having your moving truck in on closing day or Friday. Like if you're closing and funding on Friday, if at all possible, get the moving truck to come on Monday. I promise you, a seller's idea of move-in ready clean is not going to be the same as a buyer's. You're going to want to go in and probably like put in shelf paper, or replace shelf paper, or do that deep clean, or do things, or just a few little things in the house before the big moving day comes. All right, give yourself like a little bit of time to just change out the air filters, do something. And I'm going to let you know right now, if you do not put that shelf liner in before you put in those cups, the chances of you coming back in and ever putting shelf liner in that house again is almost slim to none. So give yourself that time to do that before you start unpacking the whole house. Now, the other option on possession is according to a temporary residential leaseback. Again, that's a promulgated form by TREC, and it says in here, and it's an additional addendum that we can add. So a lot of times when buyers are negotiating, the sellers are going to ask for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. A leaseback, a period of time that the seller can live in the house after the property closes. Now, on that seller's temporary leaseback, it can be free to the sellers. It can be, we can ask the sellers to reimburse the buyers PITI, which is principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. The title company will figure out exactly what that is and collect that from the sellers at closing. And that'll come towards the, it'll be taken out of what's given to the sellers, and it'll be given to the buyer as a credit to their cash to close. So that'll be done right at closing and you'll see how that's outlined. So just be aware, again, please don't make your moving truck the day of possession. Now, utilities need to be turned on possession day, not closing day, but possession day. All right. So I love using this contract and going over it to kind of go over all those little deals. Settlement and other expenses. So this is where the sellers can contribute cash to close, and the lender will let you know exactly how much the lender will allow the sellers to contribute. So this is a good opportunity for buyers to get a little extra money. A lot of times, if it is a seller's market, buyers are not going to ask the sellers for any monies, because if you put in a $500,000 offer and then you ask the seller to contribute $5,000 towards your closing cost, you've got to understand that your offer is being looked at as an offer of $495,000, not $500,000, but a $495,000. So the other time this paragraph comes into play, a lot of times what I see is during the inspection period. Let's say there's some repairs that you're seeing that comes up. Let's say the HVAC is something, and maybe like the water heater is, something. And instead of asking the seller to make those repairs, we'll take it on, because we know we want a tankless water heater. We don't want them to replace it with the same thing, and whatever it is. And we've negotiated, let's say $5,000 in lieu of repairs. We can put that here. Again, that'll be applied towards cash to closing, so that at the end of the day, the buyer has more cash to make those repairs. Any questions before I go further? See, because it makes complete sense in my head. I just want to make sure it makes complete sense in your head too. All right, so let's move it. Let's keep moving. All right, prorations, right? So prorations, so you have things like, let's say taxes, HOA fees, things that are all those prorated expenses will be handled by the title company. They will figure all that out, and it'll get credited or debited as needed to the buyers and sellers. It's not done outside. Casualty loss, we see this like sometimes during hail season, tornado season, something you put in an offer and then hailstorm comes through, totals the roof. Okay. This outlines how that's going to happen. All right. And it extends the time performance, and the closing date can be extended as necessary. If for some reason the sellers can't do it, it outlines how that's going to happen. Default, mediation, you're familiar with these clauses. It was similar to the others. Escrows, if for some reason this contract doesn't go through, it outlines how the escrow monies, remember that was that 1% earnest money that was held in escrow, how that gets handled, or other things. Representation, you are who you are. Federal tax requirement, if you're a foreign person, this really applies to this paragraph applies more to foreigners. Agreement of parties. So these are all the other addendums that can be added to this contract, and there's a whole lot more, right? And you'll notice there's a lot of banks. The ones that I'm going to say that we use the most are going to be in the top right hand corner, the seller's temporary residential lease, and that determines possession, and it outlines all those little deals. We're not using the short sale addendum as much right now. Most people have a lot of equity in their homes, The other one that we're seeing a lot of is going to be the third-party financing addendum in the top left. That's always checked, typically, unless it's a cash deal. When they say third-party financing, that means that the buyer is not supplying their own cash. There is somebody else giving the buyer cash for the property. There's a third party involved. There's a backup, we have a backup addendum. And then the other big one is the HOA addendum, which is the mandatory membership in a property owners association. And then there's also the one that's not listed here. It's the appraisal clause. So sometimes buyers, if they're competing, they're going to want to put in more than what the appraised value. There's an addendum for that. It's new. Please use that. And then also, if the house is built before 1978, there's a lead-based paint addendum. And those are probably used the most. All right. Now oh no, there's a problem loading this. I don't know why that didn't load. On this page right here is the executed contract date. That is the date that you're going to put your executed contract. You do not put that date on. That is not the date where the offer was submitted or the seller viewed. Let's say you make any changes in the contract. If there's one change made on this contract, both people have to initial it. Both parties, both the buyer party and the selling party, have to initial off before you can execute. The execution date is the date that all the terms, every blank and every check mark and everything in that contract has been agreed upon by both the buyers and the sellers. Now, sellers need to understand, once they agree to this, this is binding, okay? They're not coming back to change their mind on any of it later. Buyers, on the other hand, have an option period in which they purchase purchased in order to get out of the contract or renegotiate for any reason. If there is a third-party financing addendum, that's another out in the contract. There's multiple outs in the contract for the buyers. Sellers, on the other hand, unless you cannot give a clear title, it's going to be tough. And I'm not trying to give legal advice, so I'm just letting you know that these are the situations that we can find ourselves into. So sellers need to make sure that they are wanting this. Buyers just know. Okay. Again, anybody have any questions before I move forward? We feel good? Yeah, I see you nodding your head. All right, we're good. Thumbs up. Excellent. Yay. Thank you. All right. So now we're we've made the offer. We've sent it off to the listing agent. The seller can do one of three things. They can accept the offer, reject the offer, or counter the offer. Typically what we're going to see is they either accept. Typically it's going to be, they're going to counter. Now, the times that they reject the offer is if it's like a real lowball offer. We see those with investors. Okay. If you're a listing agent, you can actually, in your listing agreement, have the sellers agree that that the listing agent does not have to submit any offers less than blank, right? If we're going on the market for $500,000 and the offer is less than $450,000, I don't want to look at it. Okay, that saves us a lot of time and energy. So one of those three things can happen. At that point, it's so critical that your agent knows you and what's important to you, right? Because when they have that conversation, when us as buyer's agents have that conversation with the listing agent, we're looking for what's important to the seller. Because sometimes for the buyer, what's important to the buyer is that they're coming to closing with as little money out of pocket as possible. But what's important to the seller is that they don't have to move out of the house right away when it closes. They really need a 3-week lease back. And if that's something that the buyer can offer and the seller can receive, we can sometimes offer less money, or maybe seller's contributions to closing, or maybe we can have the sellers pay a lease back, right? To add more cash to close. So if we are as a buyer's agent, built that relationship, asked a lot of questions, and really gotten to know our buyers, we can really negotiate really well for our buyers because we know what they need. And then we talk to the listing agent and we ask the listing agent what the sellers really need. And we make a win-win negotiation, right? Find out what makes most people happy. Now, some people are like, you got to hammer the seller at the very beginning. Well, the problem with that is that we're actually in a 30-day relationship, right? 30-day relationship. What we've seen is sellers that love their buyers are more willing to help a buyer out. There's been times where a buyer at the very end, something has come up and they need the seller's help, right? It's important that we have a good working relationship with the seller so that the buyer doesn't get bit in the katush at the very end, right? And vice versa. That relationship is so critical to have a smooth move and a smooth transaction past closing. Because as many of us know, the deal doesn't end when it closes and funds, right? There's like mail and stuff. There's always stuff. And it's good to have a good relationship. So we talked about option money and earnest money. This is critical. Get it done right away on all the ways. Schedule inspections right away. There are times we will pencil in an inspection prior to getting a contract executed. If we know that it's coming through, we'll try to get it done right away because doggone it, I don't like running out of time. So that's something that we like to do for our buyers. And what's been great is that we have a lot of relationships with our home inspectors to make that happen. So here's a sample of that's a blog that we have on our page. Where's our home inspection? Okay, here's a sample home inspection. Okay, they kind of blacked out some personal information. You'll notice it's 118 pages, right? So not all of them are 118 pages. There's a lot of it. And what you'll find out is the bulk of it at the very beginning is all disclosures. Things like they cannot tell you what's happening behind the walls. It's unreasonable, right? So all the things, all the codes, all that kind of stuff. They're going to cover structural systems, bunch of disclosures, bunch of information. So structure is going to be a lot of times foundation, right? And so you're going to have I is for inspected, NI is for not inspected, NP is not present, and D is for deficiency. And if it says D, you're going to look at your general inspector as a general doctor. What happens when you go to a general doctor and your heartbeat's not going like your heart's not going like it's supposed to? They're going to send you to a specialist, a heart specialist. Same thing with this foundation. They're like, this foundation doesn't look like. We recommend that you have a foundation specialist or an engineer come and take a look, right? And they're going to do this all the way down for HVAC, roof. Like, look at this, perch drainage plane. I don't even know what that means. So during this time, okay, when you are getting your inspection done, please know that this is your time as a buyer to ask all the questions. There is the only stupid question, you've heard this before, the only stupid question is the one that was not asked, right? Ask them. Like, what is a drainage ditch? What does that even mean? How do I, like HVAC, if it goes kaplooey, what do I do? Like somebody talks about air filters. How do I change out an air filter, right? What they're going to do is they're going to like block out 4 hours and the buyer only shows up for the last hour. And they're going to walk through the entire house, inside, outside, emergency cutoff. They'll tell you things like, this is the emergency cutoff for the whole house water. And you're like, great. How do I use it though? If I need an emergency cutoff for a whole house water, how do I turn it off? Right? There's nothing wrong with asking that question. Please ask that question because the last thing you need to know is, your house is flooding, you got to turn off the water for the whole house. I'm looking at it. How do I actually use it? That's what this inspection period is for. It's for you to get acquainted with your house and know the house, the goods and the not so goods. And there's nothing wrong with like the them saying, oh, well, this part of the house isn't perfect. It's a pre-owned house unless you're buying new construction. If you're buying new construction, you're going to send your entire inspection report and you're going to give it to the builder, right? To the general contractor, and he's going to take that inspection. He's going to use it as his to-do list to fix all those things. But if it's pre-owned, just knowing, right, about your house and what you're getting into, your house isn't going to be perfect. It's pre-owned. And we're going to take it for what it is. But when we're looking, what we're looking for is we're looking for deal breakers. We're looking for HVAC, structurals, things like that. Here's some home inspectors that our clients have used in the past that have gotten good reviews. If you want more, you can of course go to Google and find some more. You can also go to juanandbettina.com/vendors and have an access to all the vendors that have been referred to us through the years. I cannot vouch for all of them. They're just people that have been referred to us. So just know that, but these are the ones that we've actually used recently that have gotten great feedback. Mike Griffin is the person that did our personal homes and our personal properties. So we use him a lot. And this, we're also going to give you a copy of all this. You can find it at juanandbettina.com/buyers. So just know that when we're negotiating repairs during your option period ends at 5 o'clock on Thursday. Please do not let us know at 5 o'clock or at 4 o'clock that you have repair requests or that you want to terminate the contract. It's too late. Because not only we have to do an amendment to the contract, we have to do a termination of contract. There's paperwork that has to get signed. We have to submit it to you. You have to sign off it and get it to the seller. We recommend at the very minimum the day before. Okay. And for whatever reason, do not let us know that you want to terminate after 3 o'clock of termination date. There's just too much that has to get done on our part to be able to get that over and done with. So if you want to negotiate inspections, I recommend getting your inspections early and getting that ball rolling as soon as possible. Okay. Anyways, your lender will appreciate it. You'll appreciate it. It's good to get out of the gray zone. Either we're in or out. Let's get all that figured out as soon as possible. Okay. Sound good? Sounds good. So, but just know that what we're looking for is we're looking for deal breakers. Mechanical, AC, water heaters, foundation, roof. And then, so I like to break it up. So that's going to be like number one. Number two are our wish list. It doesn't have to be, but I really would like for them to fix the windows. So you can ask for the sellers to fix it, or you can ask for money in lieu of, or you can do a combination of both. And that's what we're negotiating. As a buyer rep and as a seller's rep, I typically prefer giving money in lieu of repairs. And here's why. Buyers, let's say it's painting. Like buyers want things done at this level. Sellers kind of they're moving out. Some sellers take a lot of pride in their home and they're always going to put in the best work that they can invest into the house, even for the buyer. I have sellers like that. We have some investors, they're just trying to cheap out. They're trying to get the cheapest way out. And buyers don't want the cheapest way out. They're investing in this house for a long term. So that's why I like to do money in lieu of repair. That way buyers can choose their own vendors, make it however they want. And, they can upgrade the water heater. They can make whatever upgrades they want in the process. After you're out of your option period, then we go into pending. Okay. Pending is the period of time when the title company and the lender are really need to hit the ground running. That's when they're going to order appraisals and surveys and all that kind of stuff and make sure that gets done. And the reason we typically like to wait till after option period is because we're not typically wanting our buyers to spend more money unless they know for sure they're buying the house. You're also going to shop for your insurance and get your quote from your insurance company there. All right, closing. So closing day. All right. I like to do a final walkthrough prior to closing. If you choose to not do a final walkthrough, there's like a little disclosure that says, hey, we recommend you do a final walkthrough. And the purpose of the final walkthrough is if there's a lease back, we want to make sure that the seller looks like he's moving out. If there's not a lease back, we also want to make sure that the condition of the property is the same as when we submitted the offer. We also want to ensure that all the repairs have been done. If you're not if they're doing roof, HVAC, or anything like that, if you want to have your inspectors come in during that final walkthrough right before closing, you can do that too. But they're also, sellers will submit an invoice saying that it's been done. So I like to do that either if you're having afternoon closing, do that morning of, or at the very earliest the day before closing. Okay. So closings typically will take 30 to 45 minutes. If you have a ton of questions, it can take up to an hour. Just know that utilities, we talked about this, need to be scheduled for possession. We have a utility concierge that will reach out to our buyers that'll help them with that process. So it's not like starting from scratch. Also on the seller's disclosure, it'll let the buyers know what utility companies there are as well. And yeah, make sure the buyers either wire the money ahead of time or bring a cashier's check. The title company will let you know, believe it or not, you often day of closing, so be prepared, or the day before. Wiring, there are a lot of wiring scams. Please do not wire money based solely on emailed instructions. Make sure I recommend that you pick up the phone, have a conversation with the title company, and confirm the wiring instructions prior to sending. I don't know how the scammers are figuring out, but the scammers are figuring it out, and we just got to be smarter than them. And I do believe that a conversation really helps minimize the chances of wire fraud. There's a wire fraud notice that you'll get to sign off on, but I like to let you know ahead of time as well to look out for the wire fraud and to not get frauded, because once that wire goes out, we can't get that money back. We talked about possession upon funding. That's when you actually own the property. After you close and fund, the legal documents will get, the title company will actually send it to the county clerk, and you'll get a copy mailed to you. If you want an electronic copy, just let the title company, they can get that to you as well. And all that stuff gets handled afterwards. Okay. Also, in your closing documents, the lender is going to have instructions on where to send your payments. Now, keep in mind, talk to your lender. A lot of lenders are starting the loan, but then they sell that loan to a third party. So the lender will probably let you know to look in your mail for instructions on where to send future payments to and when to expect that. So expect that there. All right. So just know that no matter where you find your home, okay, it can be in a real estate magazine. We don't have that as much, but we have like Zillow, realtor.com, realty.com, for sale signs that might be somebody else's listing, or maybe at an open house, or from a friend, or for sale by owner. Anywhere you find a house, we as the agent can help you with that. Okay. And new home builders, we love working with new construction. In fact, we have a list of a gazillion incentives that we've been working on right now. You'll know if it's at the end of the year, there's so many incentives at the end of the year, because all these builders are trying to get these houses off their books. Okay. Also, if there's a closeout in a community, they're trying to close those out super fast, and they're going to give some great incentives, great deals. Also, this year, end of 2023, there's home builders, like the big home builders that bought these blocks of money. I know I'm simplifying, and they're giving these rates, these lower rates to buyers. So there's so many great new construction incentives going on right now, new home builder incentives. So for new buyers, let's take advantage of that. And I love those. So Just know we can sell any of those. We love working with new construction. Okay. So what in new construction, what we will do as a buyer is we will actually accompany you. So let's say we have an idea of what you're looking for. We will help you find different communities. We have access to those, and we'll call and set appointments for you, just like we will with pre-construction homes, so that you can go visit and tour those homes and get the incentives. It doesn't mean you have to purchase at homes, but at least you'll get a good tour and not just like walk in and kind of get a feel of it. And we'll arrange that with everybody for you. We'll negotiate for you. We'll help walk you through that whole new home buying process. So please don't go to new construction on your own. You don't have to. We are delighted to do that with our buyers, right? Here's some other resources. I know schools are really fun. School Digger, niche.com is fun. There's Walk Score, Quick Facts, our website, and our Facebook page. A source that we love using that I think gets overlooked is Google Street View. You can actually like walk a neighborhood if you want that way, and also satellite view. If it's important to you, things that we like to look at for satellite views is a house backing up to a major street that's like one of those 6-lane streets, or is it one of those huge power lines? These are things that will impact resale in the future. Statistically, back in the day during the foreclosure crisis, we found that for the banks were having a hard time getting rid of and selling properties that backed up to major streets or those really huge power lines. So something to consider if you're purchasing. I think now a lot of buyers are buying for lifestyle. So we live in the suburbs, so which draws a lot of families. So we got to consider what buyers are looking for there, and kind of have a feel what each district looks like. Frisco and Prosper are going to be different than Allen. Allen's different from all of them because it's one high school for the entire town. There's pros and cons for that. Of course, I think there's a lot of pros, and then you've got the smaller high schools, and then you've got the ratings. So, and there's a lot of aspects in there. Location to work. Okay. Sometimes that commute is a big deal. Some people work from home. Some people don't. If they work from home, do they need an office? Where do they go for entertainment? What are their plans for their kids' future sports, right? Or because for some people that work from home, their kids' activities is the #1 priority, right? This is before we even go into all the other things like bedrooms, bathrooms, mother-in-law suite. Okay. And we actually have a whole list of questions. If you want to access to those list of questions, let us know and we'll get those over to you. Your typical MLS search criteria, this is what it's going to look. We're kind of running out of time, so I'm not going to go into sharing the Netris, but I like taking this opportunity to walk through a Netris search and set up the search in Netris, and then while sharing our screen, and then start them on an automated search, whether it's daily, immediately if they're looking to purchase right away, weekly if they're looking to purchase down the road, monthly if it's like way down the road. But these are kind of some of the criterias. And then I like to check in periodically to just see if there's any updates that we can make on that search. Okay. So, and this is pretty much it. And I hope y'all found that helpful. Are we good? Yay. Any questions? Is there anything that you guys do or add that maybe we could add other than the Netris, doing the Netris search?
I think you covered all the basics for everyone. Obviously, the dates are crucial, and I love what you gave admonishing about an early inspection, because even when you do that, inevitably, as you go back and forth, it's like it will make you want to pull your hair out.
It's
If,
amazing how
if
quick
it
time
comes
goes by.
down to 4 p.m. and you don't have those signatures, you know, that you need to make sure you give yourself a couple days to get that negotiated. Because what if one of the parties is out of town, traveling, sick, in business meetings? Don't count on the fact they're going to be available to review and sign right when you need it. So save your hair, plan ahead.
Yes. And you can tell how the buyers, like, just going through all of those. And now what I have found for most buyers, right, is once we go all that, they're expecting to have to need to sign it. It's just part of the process. You fill out the inspection report, the buyer's rep agreement, right? It's just part of the process. Because I know, like, there's been agents that are like, they're nervous to get the buyer's rep agreement. And then they're upset that they've put in all this work.
Yeah, I always get that on the front end, but what I was referring to is the seller may or may not be as motivated to sign that amendment for repairs as you and your buyer are motivated, right?
Right.
So just give yourself time in case they aren't as quick to the button.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tina. Anybody else? Are we good? All right. Well, I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. And I hope that was helpful. If I'm going to be completely transparent, I have not done that in years because we've always had the recording. So I'm going to do this again. I can tell I'm out of practice and I need to do another round. So I'm going to do this again.
I like the details you went into, and even though I do buyer consultations most of the time over the phone, and sometimes in person, but it makes me feel like I'm missing something. Even though I go through all that, the timeline and all that, because the timeline is very important. Yeah, it's almost I have to go back and refresh and make sure I'm doing everything the right way.
Yeah. And I think it keeps them from having to come back later and be like, wait, I didn't know. Right? Or the first time they hear it, by the time you go under contract or it becomes like a part of the discussion, it's the second time they've heard it. Right? Then it's just a review and a refresher versus like the initial, like, I have to make a major decision. And I just figured this, like, what?
I liken it to when a couple gets married. If you can give them advice before they get married, they're like, oh yeah, that sounds so good. And then when they get married, they're like, what did they say? What do I need to know? How do I apply this? When you bring it up again, all of a sudden it sinks in more, you know, when it really pertains to them versus on the front end.
On the front end, exactly. And it's the second time they've heard it. Now they know that there was something that they were supposed to listen to. They're like, oh yes, there's something there that I love it. I love it. Well,
Bettina, hi, this is Terry. So, hey, thanks for your time and making this available. Great information. I know everyone, it never hurts to hear it again and again and again, especially with things that are changing all the time. Thank you, Jenny, for putting that post out in the chat about the upcoming Sellers 101 webinar. Bettina, can you talk a little bit about that as to what the scoop is coming up and what you're going to be teaching?
Well, on that is really kind of what a seller can expect, right? And from us as a team. So when somebody tells us, and if you go to juanabettina.com/sellers, you'll see there's a seller intake. So we have a buyer intake and a seller intake form. So once we have an idea of what they want, we'll actually do a pre-listing email. And in that email, it's going to have links to their listing presentation, their CMA, and all of the documents that we're going to cover when we go to their house to get hired. So once we go to their house to get hired, they're going to hire us. And then what we do is we have them meet with the stager. The reason I have them meet with the stager for a staging consultation right? Versus me doing it myself is that a professional stager, this is all they do. They know the best ROI for that price point in that area, right? And they can articulate it. Can I articulate it? Yeah, but it'll take me 12 hours. They can do it in 1 hour from the front curb to the back fence and every bit in between, right? They'll go to the house and like, hey, get rid of this, consider moving this, rearranging this, get a deep clean, all that kind, all the advice. And then the seller can just take notes and write it down, and they write everything down. Then the seller can decide, okay, do I want to do this or not do this? Right? And versus, I think sometimes as a listing agent, they want to debate with me on whether they want to do it or not do it. It's not a debate. Here's the information. If you do this, we may be able to put a higher list price, right? And or the stager will say, well, in this price point, there's really no ROI for putting in granite. Like, don't bother putting in granite on a lower end home, right? Or, hey, I have a connection at a place where you can get granite slab for $1,000. The marketability on this, it'll hike it up. It'll totally be worth it, right? Or they'll say, oh, that your light fixtures are old. Consider changing all them out because this is a, $800,000 house. And this is what buyers are expecting, right? You need to invest in paint and, light fixtures, whatever. And they're going to go do that. Sellers make a decision on that. Then after they do that, we'll set a timeline. So my timeline, which I'm changing maybe because of Glenna, right? I used to would have photographers on Monday, posted as a coming soon on Tuesday, right? And then I'd go live Thursday night and allow showings all the way, and then just start showings. What Glenna was sharing with me is what she does is she goes live on Friday, but not allow showings till open house Saturday morning. So she does an open house Saturday morning and then allow first showings during that open house. So that's the strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you do it that way,
Go,
Miss
Glenna.
Glenna?
Mm-hmm. You said why?
Yeah, why do you do it that way?
Why? It builds up anticipation. I actually got it from one of my sellers, and I found out that it works and it builds up anticipation. For people to say, oh, first of all, they start calling you when they see it coming soon. And then you already put it in the MLS as the first showing is gonna be during open house. And so now everybody wants to come to the open house. When you ask buyers when they walk through the open house, yes, I saw it. I told my agent I'm coming. Some of them will come with their agents. Some of them will come without their agents because they want to see it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's smart.
I
Thanks for
think
sharing that
I kind
tip.
of like it. I kind of like it a lot.
I think I like it too.
I
That
know.
way, if you do your open house, you got a lot of people show up at the open house. That way, you can
Yeah.
do door knocking. All the neighbors
Mhm.
are excited to come see the house. Yeah, come and take a look at it on special day. So yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
And then
The
we'll have,
I have a question about the staging because I lost a listing because of a staging. And the agent that won the listing, the seller told me about it. The agent that won the listing offered, I guess she offered to pay for the staging. And so that's why they went with her. When do you do the staging consultation? After you have your listing agreement signed and everything?
yes. So once I've been hired, right? And part of that listing agreement, it says that they're going to let's say in there, they change their mind. People change I don't mind if people change their mind and don't want to, and they're like, oh, I don't want to move because whatever. That's fine. And what I tell them is like, you can change your mind until we have an executed contract. I just need you to reimburse me for my actual expenses. Right? So if they meet with the stager, right? If they schedule with the stager, because she's going to have a cancellation fee, right? Whatever my expenses are, but they meet with her And that was $500 or $800, depending, right, for the consultation. They need to reimburse me for that. I get professional photos, they need to reimburse me for that. I get 360 video, I need to get reimbursed for that. But none of that happens until I have the agreement that says they're gonna hire me. Because you know that there's a huge expense, actual expense outside of the time that we invest before a property ever hits the market.
Yep.
Okay, so for the staging, Ms. Glenna, if I may come in a little bit too and elaborate, I believe it should be at your first meeting, I would say consultation. You mentioned someone else won the listing because of the staging. They mentioned the staging. I think that would be part of the initial contact, presentations, letting them know why they should hire me, what I have to offer, and what have you. And then when they're ready to move forward, when you do when you fill out the contract, the listing agreement, there is a space there that you can put your expenses amount there that they would need to reimburse if they decide to take the house off the market and you've done all of these things. Like for example, Patina said the photo shoots, the staging, consultation, those are all part of your expenses that you need to calculate what the estimate will be for those things and put it in there. And let them know that if they go forward and you close on the property, they would never have to pay that out of their pocket. But if they decide not to go forward, the house already been listed and you already gone through all the expenses and everything, and they decide to change their mind, they will have to reimburse you for that. They will have to pay that out of their pocket. So that's how I kind of explain it to them, to let them know ahead of time, to get them that expectations that, hey, if I cancel and change my mind, I'll have to pay some money to get it canceled.
Right. And we'll cover that. But that's all in the listing agreement.
But Tina, do you put that on your buyer rep agreement? So if you show someone, 40 houses and all of a sudden then they decide not to buy something, are you charging them for your time up front if they don't buy a house?
I have
the
friends who
reciprocal.
charge upfront,
Retainer,
an
yeah.
upfront fee, and I haven't ever done that.
I have never done that.
But I
Me
have
neither.
friends who do, and they say they charge, I forget how they put it, but they charge like $500 up front.
Well, and even if you don't that, it's, hey, my fee is X amount per showing. If you choose not to go through with the purchase of a property during this process, I think that would scare off some buyers wanting to work with you.
Yeah, because
But I've also been burned by a couple people showing them, all the things, and then they decide.
Yeah. Well, rule of thumb, here's my take on it. If they're willing to go through the entire pre-approval process, it's pre-approved.
Yep.
Right. I'm willing to help somebody figure out if they want to consider purchasing. Like we'll go look at a couple properties. Like Juan goes and he looks at like this set or this set. But once they decide that they for sure want to look at properties, like they're serious, then we need to hit a pre-approval process because it is a disservice to them.
No, I agree. I've done.
If we allow them to go look at 40 properties, because that's 40 properties.
I was exaggerating.
Oh yeah, or 10 properties, right? Or like, and if they they can go weekends, like spend their weekends or afternoons or evenings or any of that time going and doing anything else, right? They just have to go get that pre-approval letter from a legit loan officer, not a faux loan officer.
All right.
You know what I'm talking about, faux loan officers.
And if I may say something on that too, the way I do it, because I've learned that I got burned too from the beginning. Before I start putting my strategies together, I just going out there too. So so I stopped going out to go see property unless they have a pre-approval. At our buyers consultations, I let them know everything, why I don't take them out to buy or see property unless I get a pre-approval. I let them know that some people charge retainer, upfront, but I'm one of those that really don't charge the retainer. However, I need them to sign my buyer rep agreement. You have to, just lay it out from the beginning all to them, and then ask them what, about their location and, specific location they want to be in, and get all of the criteria that they're looking for. Then once I get all of that down, then I go back and tell them, I say, okay, I got all of your criteria, but I want you to keep these tips in mind. You have to be a little bit flexible. No home is perfect. And there are times when you see the home, all the checkbox, one or two may be missing, and you have to sometimes cultivate. Are you willing to do that? So we do go over all of this from the beginning, and I find it worked to where they describe their criteria to me, and I take, sometimes it takes me a week, 1 week or less than that. I have buyer that I contracted on the first day out, because I think they're exactly or very close to what they're looking for. So I think when that process for me, it has helped me save time and back and forth. And of course, if they get a pre-approval and everything, that means they're serious and they're ready to go. So you just have to find their motivation and what exactly they're looking for, and then hold their hand. But it's about building relationship. I don't charge them up front, but even if we don't find house the first week, we already are very tight enough that they count on me on everything. So I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, it all helps. And I think it's all boils down to having that initial conversation, right? And I've always leaned in on the IABS and the buyer's rep agreement and the contract to help lead the conversation, because they're promulgated forms.
Right.
And
It's like dating. It's like dating. If you go on your first date, you have to let your date know what your expectations are. You get their expectations, they get your expectations, then you work through it, and see if you can cultivate and meet each other halfway. But if you don't have that conversations, then
Right.
everybody's just kind of like in the air.
Yeah,
And then
that's right. Well, guys, I hope everybody has signed up for the rally. There's also the Christmas party. Early bird is still available for the Christmas party thing. And now we know how to fix our Eventbrite link for next time. And golly, thank you for your patience. I was like, I noticed I started off a little rusty. I was like, man, it's been a minute. So I hope that was helpful for you guys, like that buyer's rep agreement. And just so you know, have y'all seen and then I'm going to let y'all like run because I don't want to keep you too long. So if you go to juanandbettina.com,